I'm going to show you several non-destructive techniques to enhance an image with volumetric light. This works best with images that have a clear light source and an obvious direction for the light to be scattered in. I'll switch to the pen tool using P on the keyboard, and I'll single-click at the top of the entrance to create the first polycurve node. I'll then click outside of the image bounds to create the second point, then create a third point down here, a fourth point here, then click on the first node to close the curve. To add a fill to this curve, I'll switch over to the color panel. Notice the default option is set to no fill here. As soon as I begin to manipulate one of the RGB sliders, a white fill will be created. To match the tones in this image, I'll create an off-white fill with a slight orange tint. Now I will do two things. First, I'll set the blend mode of this layer to screen, and this will help it blend over the tones underneath when I add some blur, which is the second step. To bring up the effects panel, I'll go to Window, Quick Effects, then on the panel, I'll enable Gaussian blur at the bottom and bring it all the way up to 100 pixels. Back on the Layers panel, I'll reduce the opacity of this curve layer, perhaps to around 50%. And at this point, I may want to experiment with the blend mode. I've chosen screen because it blends the volumetric light nicely over the background detail without becoming too bright. It does tend to decrease the color intensity, however. I could try hard light, which retains more of the color, and I might settle on an opacity of 25% for now. Now I'll tidy up the curve nodes. Because I already have the pen tool selected, I can use P again to switch to the node tool, and this allows us to modify existing nodes and create new ones if required. I could, for example, click-drag on the bottom right node and move it down further to expand the spread of the volumetric light. I could also do the same to the top node. If I wanted to improve the accuracy of the curve around the entrance, I could single-click along the line to add more nodes, then drag them into place, like so. Now that we have the volumetric light, we can create some additional blending beneath it to help strengthen the effect. I'll select the background layer beneath the curve layer, then create a new pixel layer and set its blend mode to overlay, then take the opacity down to 30%. Then I'll select the paintbrush tool using B on the keyboard, and I'll use the keyboard and mouse modifier to make the brush nozzle bigger and create a soft edge. On Mac, you hold Command and Option, then left-click and drag, and on Windows, you hold Control and Alt and left-click and drag. I can drag to the right to increase the brush width, then drag up to reduce its hardness. Finally, I want to paint with pure white. I'm currently set to that off-white I created earlier, but I can hold Shift while dragging one of the sliders to move them all up simultaneously towards pure white. I can then paint into the area where the volumetric light is being scattered. And I'll just reduce my brush width using the left square bracket key to paint into the areas on the left here. A useful technique at this point is to use H to switch to the View tool. This lets us pan around the document, but more importantly stops us from accidentally painting with a brush tool whilst we examine the work. I feel this brushing layer is slightly too strong, so I'll take the opacity down to around 15%. Rather than using the opacity option here, I can quickly type 1.5, which is quicker and more precise. I could experiment further with this effect. For example, I might select the curve layer and change its fill from a solid color to a gradient. To do this, I'll select the gradient tool using G on the keyboard, and then I'll drag from left to right. Now I can adjust the midpoint, which lets me determine how quickly the light falls off. Something else to try is adding more detail to the volumetric light, giving it a textural quality. I'll increase the layer's opacity to 50% before attempting this, so we can better see the results. So one trick we can use to create detail is to add a live procedural texture filter by going to Layer, New Live Filter Layer, Colors, Procedural Texture. On the preset drop-down, I'll choose Perlin Noise and set this layer's blend mode to Hard Light. Now I can increase the persistence slider and type 100 into the cell count input to make the texture denser. I can also click drag on the document view to move the origin point used for the Perlin noise creation. So now I can expand the curve layer and hide the procedural texture layer to see the before, then show it again to see the after. Because these techniques are all non-destructive, I can still experiment with the curve layer opacity until I find a suitable value. And I can, of course, click on the procedural texture icon to bring the dialog back up if I want to experiment with these parameters. Then I can shift-click and select both layers so I can hide them to see the before, then show them again to see the after and evaluate the result. Looking at this, I perhaps might go back into my procedural texture settings and increase the cell count slightly, then just reposition until I'm happy with the effect. And there we go, a quick video highlighting some non-destructive techniques for adding volumetric light to your images. Thank you for watching.